The church bells rang, but the pews were half empty. My bouquet trembled in my hands as I scanned the aisle. My parents' seats, the ones reserved right in the front row, were empty. I called them earlier, desperate for an explanation. Their voices echoed in my head. "Enjoy marrying your plumber, Jessica," Mom sneered. "We won't be embarrassed with you." My father's silence was worse. A quiet agreement. The sting burned like acid. They had spent thousands, tens of thousands, on my sister Emily's lavish wedding just a year earlier. Designer gown, ballroom reception, a live orchestra. They'd paraded it as the wedding of the decade. Me. I wasn't worth showing up for. But little did they know, they'd just made the biggest mistake of their lives. If you're watching this, drop a comment below, hit like and subscribe, because what I'm about to tell you will leave you questioning what family really means. My name is Jessica. I am 31 years old, and last summer, my parents abandoned me on the most important day of my life. They thought they were teaching me a lesson, punishing me for marrying a man they saw as beneath us. But in reality, they taught themselves something far worse. Because my husband wasn't who they thought he was. And the moment I sent them one photo, their world flipped upside down. Let me rewind. I grew up in a house obsessed with appearances. Emily, my older sister, was the golden child, straight as polished manners, engaged to a corporate lawyer. My parents poured every ounce of pride into her. Me. I was the stubborn one. The one who loved art more than academics, who worked side jobs, who didn't care about chasing prestige. And when I fell in love with Mark, a kind, hardworking plumber, they laughed. "Jessica, you're throwing your life away," my mom scolded. "You could do so much better." But I didn't care. Mark wasn't flashy, but he was loyal, gentle, and real. He made me feel like home. Still, my parents never saw him as anything more than a man in overalls. And when I announced we were getting married, they scoffed. "Do what you want. Just don't expect us to celebrate your mistake." So when the big day came and those chairs sat empty, I wasn't surprised. I was furious, but not surprised. What they didn't know, though, was that Mark had a truth they had never bothered to ask about. And one picture would expose it all. The ceremony was still beautiful, even without them. My friends clapped, my in-laws cheered, and Mark's smile steadied my shaking hands as we exchanged vows. But every time I glanced toward those empty front row seats, my chest tightened. After the reception, I slipped away into the bridal suite with my phone. My parents hadn't sent a single message, not even a congratulations. I thought about calling again, but then I remembered Mom's cruel voice. "Enjoy marrying your plumber. We won't be embarrassed with you." That was the moment my anger hardened into resolve. I scrolled through the photos my maid of honor had just sent me, the ones of Mark looking devastatingly handsome in his suit. His tie perfectly knotted, his broad shoulders filling out the tuxedo, his kind eyes lit with joy. He looked every bit the man I always knew he was. Strong, successful, steady. And more importantly, something my parents never cared to ask. Mark wasn't just a plumber. Before he ever touched a wrench, Mark had built his own contracting company from the ground up. By 30, he owned 3 trucks, employed 12 people, and had a thriving business remodeling luxury homes. The plumber label was technically true, but it was just the surface. Behind it, he was a self-made entrepreneur with more financial stability than most of my parents' country club friends combined. They had mocked him for his job title, never realizing his name was already on contracts worth more than their house. I chose a single photo, the one of him shaking hands with the officiant, wedding band glinting on his finger, confidence radiating off him, and sent it in the family group chat. The caption was only 3 words. "Meet your mistake." The first, nothing. Then my phone buzzed nonstop. "Mom, Jessica, is that really him?" "He looks." "Dad, why didn't you tell us he owns a company?" "Emily, wait, that's Mark? He looks amazing." OMG. I laughed so hard tears blurred my vision. Now they wanted answers. Now they wanted to know the man they'd dismissed without a second thought. As Mark walked in, slipping his arms around me, I showed him the flood of messages. He chuckled. "Guess they finally figured out the suit fits." I kissed his cheek. "They'll never see us the same way again." But deep down I knew this was only the beginning. Because my parents weren't just embarrassed anymore. They were panicking. The next morning I woke up to a string of missed calls. 15 from Mom. 10 from Dad. Even Emily had texted. "They're freaking out. Call them." Please. For years I had been the daughter in the shadows, the one they dismissed, the one they thought they could ignore without consequence. Now suddenly I was the center of their world, because their pride was at stake. I let them stew. I made coffee, curled up with Mark, and ignored every buzzing notification. For once the silence belonged to me. By noon Mom finally left a voicemail. Her voice, usually sharp and commanding, was trembling. Jessica, honey, we made a mistake. We didn't realize Mark was successful. We thought you were throwing your life away. Please, can we meet him? Can we talk? Her desperation made me laugh out loud. Not embarrassed now, are you? An hour later Dad called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Jessica, he said, voice stiff but cracking around the edges. We judged too quickly. If you and Mark would come to dinner, we can start over. I let the silence stretch. Then I said calmly, funny. Yesterday I was marrying a plumber you couldn't stomach being seen with. Today I'm marrying a man you suddenly respect. Which one is it? He had no answer. Just a sigh. That evening, Emily showed up at my apartment, face red from the cold. She held a wrapped gift and pushed it into my hands. Don't hate me, Jess. I tried to tell them not to say those things. But you know how they are. I raised an eyebrow. And yet you still stood by them. Her eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry. They're terrified now. Everyone's talking about how amazing Mark looked, how successful he is. They feel like fools. I crossed my arms. Good. Maybe it's about time. When she left, I sat with Mark on the couch, scrolling through the messages my parents kept sending. Begging. Apologizing. Trying to backpedal. He kissed my temple. You know they'll never change completely, right? I nodded. But I've changed. And they're about to learn that I'm not the daughter they can insult and discard anymore. Because now the power had shifted. And for the first time they were the ones knocking at my door. By the end of that week the pressure campaign was in full swing. Bouquets of flowers arrived at my apartment. One from Mom, one from Dad, even one tagged from both of us. Handwritten notes stuffed inside read like rehearsed apologies. We should never have judged Mark by his job title. Please give us a chance to make things right. It was almost funny. They had ignored me on my wedding day, but now they were sending roses like guilty lovers. I left the flowers on the counter to wilt. Then came the dinner invitation. A long email from Mom full of syrupy words. Jessica, we'd love to host you and Mark. We want to celebrate your marriage properly. We'll make your favorite dishes. Please let us meet our son-in-law. My jaw tightened as I read it. Celebrate? They hadn't even shown up to the ceremony. Mark looked over my shoulder at the screen. What do you think? He asked gently. I smirked. I think they're terrified. And maybe it's time they saw the truth up close. So I agreed, but on my terms. When we walked into their house that Sunday, the shift was palpable. My parents, once so smug and superior, suddenly looked nervous. Mom actually hugged me first, her perfume cloying but her arms stiff. Dad extended his hand to Mark with an awkward smile. Mark, Dad said carefully, it's good to finally meet you properly. Mark shook his hand, steady and firm. Likewise, sir. We sat down to dinner, the table filled with dishes I hadn't seen since childhood. Mom had pulled out every stop from roast chicken to apple pie. But the air was thick with something unsaid. Finally, Mom cleared her throat. Jessica, we want to apologize. We judged you. We judged Mark. We thought you were settling. Her eyes flicked nervously toward him. But we see now we were wrong. You've done well for yourself. Very well. Dad nodded stiffly. You chose wisely. I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. No. I didn't choose wisely to meet your standards. I chose wisely for me. You never cared to see that until it fit your definition of success. Their smiles faltered. Mark reached for my hand under the table, squeezing it. For the first time I realized something powerful. Their approval no longer mattered. But watching them squirm, that was priceless. The dinner dragged on, every bite laced with tension. My parents asked Mark polite, stiff questions about his business, his contracts, his future plans. They wanted to sound supportive, but I could hear the desperation in their voices. Every word was about appearances, not love. Mark, calm as ever, answered graciously. He spoke about his cruise, his projects, the homes he was remodeling. My parents nodded along, trying to mask the regret etched across their faces. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I set down my fork. Tell me something. Would you have apologized if Mark was just a plumber? If he didn't own a company, if he didn't fit your shallow definition of success, would you still be here tonight? The room went silent. Mom's cheeks flushed pink. Dad shifted uncomfortably, refusing to meet my eyes. Mark squeezed my hand under the table. He already knew the answer. So did I. Mom finally whispered, Jessica, we only wanted what's best for you. I laughed bitterly. No, you wanted what looked best for you. There's a difference. Their silence was all the confirmation I needed. I leaned forward, my voice steady. Here's the truth. You don't get to treat me like an embarrassment one day and a trophy the next. Mark and I don't need your approval. We don't need your money. We don't need anything from you. Dad's face hardened, but there was no fire behind it this time, just defeat. The rest of the meal was awkward small talk, forced smiles, and long pauses. When dessert came, I didn't touch it. I was done. As we stood to leave, Mom clutched my arm. Jessica, please, don't shut us out completely. I looked her in the eye. That depends on you. Respect us or lose us. It's that simple. Mark held the door open, his quiet strength steadying me. Together we walked out without looking back. Driving home, Mark glanced over at me. You okay? I nodded slowly. Yeah. Because for once I didn't let them rewrite the story. I did. And deep down I knew this wasn't just about a wedding anymore. This was about every year they made me feel smaller than Emily, every time they put appearances before love, every time they forgot I was their daughter too. Now they had to face the reality. The daughter they dismissed had built a life without them. And she wasn't afraid to walk away. The weeks after that dinner felt strangely calm. For the first time in my life, I wasn't craving their approval. I wasn't waiting for them to praise me or compare me to Emily, or finally treat me like I mattered. But my parents weren't used to being powerless. It started with little things, voicemails from Mom dripping with guilt. Jessica, we're getting older. Don't you want us in your life? Then Dad's texts. Family sticks together no matter what. You can't just cut us off. Every message carried the same tone, control disguised as concern. Meanwhile, Emily reached out. Her perfect facade had started to crack. She called late one night, her voice shaking. Jess, I know I was Mom and Dad's favorite. I didn't realize how bad it was for you until I watched them treat you like that on your wedding day. I'm sorry I didn't defend you. The apology surprised me. For years, Emily had basked in the glow of being the golden child. Hearing her admit the truth felt like a small step toward healing. But then she added, they're terrified now, you know. People in their circle keep asking about Mark, about his business. They can't stop bragging about him. I sighed. So now I'm only valuable because of who I married. Emily went quiet. Because she knew I was right. Mark noticed the storm brewing before I did. One night as we cooked dinner together, he said gently, Jess, they're trying to pull you back in. You don't have to play their game. I looked at him, the man they once mocked as just a plumber, and realized he was right. I had already won. The power wasn't theirs anymore. It was mine. So when Mom invited us to another family dinner, I declined. When Dad sent yet another lecture about duty, I ignored it. When Emily begged me to just give them another chance, I told her calmly, respect isn't optional. Until they learn that, there's nothing to talk about. The silence that followed was different this time. No more flowers. No more guilt trips. Just quiet. And in that quiet I felt peace. For once, my life wasn't revolving around their approval or their shame. It revolved around me and the family I was building with Mark. One based on love, not appearances. But deep down I knew Christmas would be the final test. Because around that table the truth always came out. December arrived and with it came the inevitable. An invitation to Christmas dinner. The card was handwritten by Mom, the same looping script I'd seen on birthday cards all my life. Jessica and Mark, please come home for Christmas. Let's start fresh. I stared at it for a long time. A year ago those words would have felt like bait. Now they felt like a test. Mark squeezed my shoulder. We don't owe them anything, he reminded me. I know, I said quietly. But maybe this isn't about them anymore. Maybe it's about me proving I've changed. So we went. Walking into my parents' house felt surreal. The tree glittered in the corner, stockings lined the mantel, The smell of cinnamon filled the air. But instead of the old superiority, there was hesitation. Mom hugged me longer than usual. Dad shook Mark's hand firmly, his pride swallowed. Even Emily smiled, genuinely this time. Dinner began with small talk, safe topics, whether the kids. But eventually the silence stretched and Mom cleared her throat. "Jessica," she said softly, "last Christmas, we were cruel. We thought we knew better. We didn't. And we're sorry." I felt every pair of eyes on me. For once, I didn't feel the sting of being the overlooked daughter. I didn't feel the ache of comparison. I felt steady. "You were cruel," I said evenly. "You made me feel like an embarrassment for choosing love over status. But here's the truth. You don't get to decide my worth. Not then. Not now. Not ever again." Dad's jaw clenched, but instead of snapping back, he nodded. "You're right." Emily added quietly, "We've all been wrong. And you deserve better." The rest of the night was strangely light. We laughed, exchanged gifts, even took a family photo, something I hadn't wanted in years. It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't poisoned either. As Mark and I left, Mom pressed my hand. "Thank you for giving us another chance." I pulled away gently. "This isn't another chance. This is a new set of rules. Respect me, respect Mark, or you lose us. Simple." Her eyes filled with tears. "We understand." Driving home through the quiet snow, Mark smiled at me. "You did it, Jess. You took your power back." I looked out the window, lights twinkling across rooftops. "No," I whispered. I finally realized I had it all along. But I knew one last thing still had to be said, the truth I owed myself. Christmas night ended differently than any other before. For years I used to leave my parents' house with tears in my eyes, replaying their words, wondering why I was never enough. But this time I walked out holding Mark's hand, my head high, my chest light. Still, as we drove home through the snowy streets, something inside me stirred. I realized the story wasn't finished until I said the words out loud, the words I had been holding back all my life. 2 days later, I invited my parents, Emily, and her family to our house for dinner. Mark helped me cook, the table glowing with candles. When they arrived, there was a nervous air, like they were walking into a courtroom instead of a dining room. We ate in silence at first. Finally, I set my fork down. "I need to say something," I began. Their eyes snapped to me. Mom gripped her napkin. Dad straightened in his chair. Emily bit her lip. I took a deep breath. "All my life you made me feel like I was less. Emily was the star, the one you celebrated. I was the stubborn one, the difficult one, the girl who made the wrong choices. And when I married Mark, you proved it again, by not even showing up to the most important day of my life." Mom's eyes filled with tears, but I held up my hand. "Don't interrupt. You called my wedding an embarrassment. You said you wouldn't be caught dead watching me marry a plumber. But here's what you didn't know. Mark is more than a plumber. He built something with his own 2 hands. He treats me with respect, with love, with loyalty, things money can't buy. And that's why I married him." I glanced at Mark, his calm strength steadying me. Then I turned back to them. "So here's the truth. I don't need your approval. I never did. But if you want to be part of my life, part of our life, it will be on my terms. Respect us or you lose us. It's that simple." The silence that followed was heavy. Dad's lips parted like he wanted to argue, but for once no words came. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. Emily whispered, "Jess, you're right. You've always been right." Finally, Dad let out a long breath. "You're stronger than we gave you credit for." I met his eyes evenly. "I was always this strong. You just never looked close enough." The rest of the night was lighter. We shared pie, told stories, even laughed once or twice. But this time it felt different. Not because everything was magically fixed, it wasn't, but because the balance had shifted. I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. I wasn't the quiet shadow sitting at the table, waiting for scraps of approval. I was the one setting the rules. And they knew it. After they left, Mark wrapped his arms around me. "I'm proud of you," he said softly. I leaned into him, tears finally spilling, not from pain but from release. For once, I'm proud of me too. Standing there in the quiet glow of our living room, I realized something I wish I'd known years ago. My worth was never theirs to decide. Not my parents', not Emily's, not anyone's. It was mine all along. So to anyone watching this, Have you ever been made to feel like you weren't enough? Like the people who should love you the most only saw your flaws? Share your story in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more. Because here's the lesson I'll never forget. The greatest revenge is knowing your own worth and living it unapologetically.